Great. All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And so today's session revolves around the Utane Tokef, which you also may know it as the kind of, as it's colloquially known sometimes, the who will live, who will die prayer. And we hear it on the high holidays and only on the high holidays. And it can be a very heavy prayer and a very heavy concept. And so often, especially when I was growing up, I felt like we would get to this part of the service, we'd get to the Utane Tokef, and it would be read and there'd maybe be something said about it. And then we would just quickly move on. And I remember as a kid and teenager, just kind of taking a step back and being like, there is a lot here. This is very heavy. These are a lot of concepts. And by the time I started processing, we were already in the next part of the service. And so as I got older and started leading high holiday services for myself, one of the things that I started doing was really taking the time to sit with the text and make my own interpretations of the text and make it something meaningful for me. And so that's a large part of what we are going to do today in preparing for the high holidays, doing a deep dive into the Utane Tokef, figuring out how we can make it not just relevant to today, but make it relevant to you. So what you're hearing right now is potentially one of the longest periods of talking you're going to hear me do, because today is a lot about personal reflection between each other, and having a chance to make that meaning for ourselves. And so, as I said, there's going to be some writing in this. So sometimes where we're going to be reading some readings or listening to some different commentaries and jotting down our own thoughts. And there will also be some time that we're going to be talking to each other and just kind of figuring out what meaning that we can make of all this. And so we're going to get started by reading the Utane Tokef, and I'm going to pull it up on my screen. Let's see. Hold on one second. There it is. Okay. I was a Teams person last year, and so I'm still sometimes getting used to Zoom myself. All right, there we go. Can everyone see that? Just kind of give me a thumbs up. Great. Is there anyone that would like to, we're just going to read the English parts. So once we get to sovereign, right back down to let us, is there anyone else that would like to start us off reading the English words of the Utane Tokef?
I'll read for you.
Great, thank you.
And so let these words of sanctity ascend to you, for you are our God and sovereign. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love, your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal, you record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten, and when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark and imprint like no other. And so a great shofar will cry, Tekiah! A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. Do you want me to continue?
You can, unless there's anyone else that would like to read, but if you would like to keep going, you're welcome to.
Okay. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? who will be humbled and who exalted. But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses, but we are flesh and blood. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere. A glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name. And our name you have linked with yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much for reading. And so that is the Utane Tokef. And so often we hear these words, we read these words, it's often done musically, and then we just move on. And the whole point of today is that we're not going to just move on. And we are really going to sit here and sit here and really talk about this. And in a second, I'm going to give all of you a chance to reflect on the words that we have just read. But before we do that, does anyone want to share just the first thing that came to your mind? Like immediate thought popped into your brain, whether you agree with it, don't agree with it, something that stuck out to you. Does anyone, and you can either click the raise your hand button on Zoom. So if you go to the smiley face with the plus sign and click the raise hand button, or you can just raise your hand up and I'll see. Does anyone have kind of an immediate reaction that they would like to share? Well, I know for me, one of my immediate reactions to the Utane Tokef is that it talks very heavily of predestination. And I know that that's something that I reflect on a lot when I read the Utane Tokef. Is there anyone else that would like to share a quick something that popped into their mind? Yes, Terry.
Well, every time I read it, it seems to link our demise with sin. And yet it also says, but we're dust. I mean, it seems to contradict itself, that and almost as if our demise is punishment for sin, because then it talks about how God doesn't want the death of a sinner. So it always seems contradictory to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Russell?
You always think about how many things are not under our control. Until the last several years, when they would say pestilence, it didn't make any sense to me. Now we've had COVID, we know about pestilence. And all those things are things that we can't control. Sort of scary in a way.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing, Russell. And then Ben.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit lighter on this one. My immediate thought was Hamilton, to be honest with you. I immediately thought of that last song. So I was like, oh yeah, there we go.
Oh, the who will live and die and tell our story, that one?
Yeah, that kind of thing. I would just immediately jump to that. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, when I heard who will live, who will die and tell our story, in my mind, I had like, oh, Utane Tokef when I saw it. That was also the first thing that came to my mind. And so we just talked about just kind of our, Ellen. Ellen, was there something you would like to share?
Sorry, I had it on mute.
Okay.
I had almost the same reaction as Ben. I immediately had to think of Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen, definitely. If you don't know, Leonard Cohen, the person who also wrote Hallelujah, Hallelujah, he also set the idea and the words of Utane Tokef to song. And if we have time at the end of this, I can actually play it for you because it's a very powerful and moving song for sure. All right. And so at this time, we've talked about our immediate reactions, and this is going to be the first period of reflection. And so again, I know I said it in the very beginning. So if you weren't here in the very beginning, make sure you have something to write with. So whether that's typing on your computer, writing on your phone, or pencil and paper, whatever it is that you like to write with, this is going to be our first reflection period. I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. So think 8:14, 8:15, around there, whatever it ends up being. And what I want everyone to do is to write down not just their immediate reactions, but what they agree with, what they disagree with, what questions come up when hearing the words of the Utane Tokef. So not talking about interpretation just yet, but when you listen to explicitly the words of the Utane Tokef, what do you think? Agree with, disagree with, what questions do you have? So I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes, and let's just take 2 minutes and write down your thoughts on it. All right, and we're going to come back together. Is there anyone that would want to share? So again, you can click on the hand raise button in Zoom, or you can just raise your hand. Is there anyone that would like to share what they wrote? It's very personal, and I completely understand that, so please don't feel pressured to share. Is there anyone that would like to share either a question or a thought that they had? Yes, Mom.
Okay, so it's to your invitation of a sort of a reflection or a question. I always wonder during this prayer, so much of like the confessional that we recite on Yom Kippur, it's communal. It's the litany of sins and recognition that no one of us has done all of that, but as a Jewish people, we've probably done all of that. And so is the notion at the end, or there's all these, the talking about demise, and then at the end, it's the notion of, prayer, repentance, and charity. Is it individual? Is it communal? It's both. I always wonder, what that means, and if what that is perhaps meant to inspire us to.
Great. Thank you for sharing your question. And there's going to be a lot of chances for discussion later, because at the very end of our session today, there's going to be a lot of commentary that we're going to be reading through. And so we're going to have a chance to discuss with each other all these questions and thoughts that we are having as well. Russell.
Yeah, I have to think, suppose I try to do the right thing and be good, and all these other people are not doing the right thing, and they're going to bring on the pestilence, the war, and the famine anyway.
Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you guys for sharing and just talking. I appreciate just hearing what you guys have to say. And so before we get too far into it, I do think we are going to have enough time. I want to play, and I'm going to see if I can find a good YouTube recording of it, Leonard Cohen's Who by Fire. And that is Who by Fire by Leonard Cohen. And so you may notice, what do you think? Just immediate reactions. Does this sound like a very happy song, or does this song sound a little bit more deep and reflective?
It's got that dread in it.
It's got a little bit of that dread in it. A lot like when we think of Utane Tokef, what a lot of us feel. And he wanted to write a song that represented it. And I don't know about you, I really feel like Leonard Cohen did a very good job at capturing what a lot of us feel when we read the Utane Tokef. And
I hadn't heard it before, his version of this song before, and I can't believe it. He nailed it totally.
He really nailed it. I actually hadn't heard it before this past year, and then I listened to it, and I was like, "That's it." I was like, "That's the Utane Tokef." I was like,
and he
modernized it.
He modernized it. Brought so many of those things from our world into the prayer.
And I'm very glad that you said that, because the next thing that we're going to do with this idea of modernizing it and bringing in things happening in present day to this prayer, this is a very ancient prayer that has been around for many, 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 many years. But when you really think about it, some of the ideas in it aren't as ancient as we sometimes may think that they are. And so I'm just going to kind of share when we get to that section of who by fire, who by water, and we go down all of the different who bys and we get to the dichotomies. This is what the Utane Tokef looks like in the modern day.
Emily, I just wanted to quickly share with you.
Yeah.
As someone who's been a member of Temple Israel for over 30 years, and I sang in the Temple Israel choir for many, 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 many years, I really miss singing Untitled Chapter. I mean, this was part of the liturgy that we practiced and prepared for holiday times, and it was such a thrill to sing, and I really miss that. Just thought I'd mention it. Thanks.
Well, it's so great to hear that you sang in the choir. I mean, something that I'm looking forward to is I really want to bring back a lot of the ensembles. And so I'm excited that you're excited about the choir, because I'm also excited about having a choir presence here again. And I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And then Ellen, I guess before we go on, I saw that your hand was up. Is there something that you wanted to share?
Well, two things about Leonard Cohen. The first one is that he can make a hula hoop dance sound depressed. And the second thing is, yes, there are a lot of things that he's got from modern times, but also from Christianity. He had a nanny who was Christian, Catholic, Roman Catholic, and he went to mass with her and he went to synagogue. And he, not that he was very enamored with Christianity, but he did put a lot of things in his songs. And you can notice that in this one too again. That's all I wanted to say.
Awesome. I did not know that about Leonard Cohen. So thank you for sharing that. And I agree. He can make a kindergarten classroom feel depressed. He's very good at that style of music. And so going back to those who by fires, who by waters. And so again, I just kind of compiled an example for each one of how this applies to the modern day. And so who by fire, hundreds of lives have been taken in California from wildfires. Who by water, in 2021, the flooding in Waverly, Tennessee, so that's about 30 to 40 minutes west of Nashville, 20 people died in that flooding. Who by famine, I taught public school last year, and I had a student whose family couldn't afford food. She came every day hungry, and so the school would start to send her and her family home with food. And when she would get home, her parents would say, "We don't need the help," and would throw the food away. And so my student didn't have any food at home and was starving every single day that my student came into school. And that's not unique to my student. That's not unique to Nashville. That's all over. Who by sword? The war in Ukraine and the shootings that never seem to stop, with another headline, it seems, every couple weeks. Who by beast? People perishing from disease-carrying insects, bites from spiders and snakes, encounters with wild animals. Who by earthquake? Just a few days ago, on September 19th, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake in Mexico claimed multiple lives. Who by plague? Over 1 million deaths in the United States alone from COVID-19. Who by strangulation? The coroner confirmed that Gabby Petito, a young woman who went missing after getting into an argument with her fiance, who she had been traveling with, died of strangulation. She is not the first nor the last person to die of strangulation from domestic violence. Who by stoning? Stoning is an ancient form of the death penalty. And even though stoning is not used anymore, at least in the United States, in Tennessee, lethal injection is the primary form of execution. And then we get to all the different dichotomies. Who will rest? Who will wander? More than 500,000 Americans are unhoused. It is estimated that Tennessee has around 7,000 of them, with California having the largest unhoused population at over 150,000 people unhoused from the World Population Review. Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Suicide is the 12th leading cause of death in the United States. In 2020 alone, almost 46,000 Americans died by suicide from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Who will be calm and tormented? On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? The official poverty rate in 2021 was 11.6%. That is 37.9 million people living in poverty. To put in perspective, that is almost 6 times Tennessee's population and only slightly smaller than the population of the entire state of California. And that is from the US Census Bureau. Who will be humbled and who will be exalted? While many businesses were forced to close during the pandemic, other businesses, especially larger ones such as Amazon, saw growth or at least sustained their health. And then we get to this part kind of at the end of the prayer that says, but repentance, prayer, and charity shall avert the severe decree. And this is kind of what gives me some pause, because it made me think, was everyone who died from COVID not charitable? Those who died from the flooding in Waverly, did they not pray enough? Because in a way, if we take these words literally and look at them exactly how they are written, is that what we are supposed to believe? That if you do those things, bad things will not happen to you? Does anyone, before we go on to some readings that I've prepared for all of you guys to kind of look at and reflect on, is there anyone that has any thoughts as to what we just read or what I just said? Ellen? Ellen, is there something that you wanted to say?
Sorry, I was muted again.
Okay.
Airhead. Anyway, yeah, I think it's not an individual thing. I think it is a thing where, as a people, we are supposed to be holy, and once we are holy and we abide by His laws, then He promises all sorts of things that are good. And I think that kind of connects to this.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Ellen.
Mhm.
And then Linda, is there something that you wanted to share?
I just absolutely loved the way you presented this, the way you went through that and modernized it to talk with real numbers. The effect of all of this list was incredibly useful and powerful, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that so much. And so in this next section, it is very important for me for a few things. One, that this is so much about all of you getting a chance to make your own interpretation. And my goal is that I'm not going to let my personal interpretation shine through, because I want to lead the conversations and give you guys the chance to make these interpretations for yourself. And so what I'm going to do next, and this will be a little bit of time, so if you would like to turn your camera off, that is okay. What's going to happen next is I'm going to give you all 8 minutes to look over. There's 15 readings that I'm going to send, and it's going to be 3 ways. The first way I'm going to send it is a Google Drive link. And so if you click the Google Drive link, that'll be the first one up. That will take you to all 15 readings all in a row. If you click on the PDF, that will be the second thing. That will be something you can download and read. And the third thing would be if you are someone who likes listening to audiobooks and would rather listen to a recording instead of read it, the third thing I'm going to send is a link to all of the readings as audio recordings that I recorded a few days ago. So whether you want to read it or whether you'd want to listen to it, all those options are available. The readings come from 3 different places. So some of them come from here. This is just a very large version of what you'll see on the high holidays, the Mishkan HaNefesh. Some of the readings come from here. Some of our readings are various commentaries by rabbis and scholars. And some of our readings come from this book called My Jewish Year, which was someone named Abigail Pogrebin, who actually what she did is she took an entire year and dove into every single Jewish holiday and commented on it. And so each chapter is a reflection on a different Jewish holiday. And so readings 13 through 15 are the ones that come from this book, My Jewish Year. You don't have to go in order from the readings. You don't have to read all of them. If you want to just take one of them and really dive into it, go for it. And my goal is for you to read these commentaries and use it to help figure out meaning for yourself for the Utane Tokef. Because no one else can tell you how to feel. No one else can tell you how to interpret it. Only you can interpret it for what it means for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead now and put those links in. So here is the first one. This is going to be the Google Drive link that I am putting in. So if you would like to look at it as a Google Drive link, that is what I'm putting in now, and that will be in the chat. So if you go to at the bottom, the speech bubble that says chat, I am now going to put in the PDF, and it's going to be the same thing, just a different way to access it. And now the third thing I'm going to put in is the audio recordings. The recordings are numbered, so if you want to listen to it, you'll just click on it, and then you'll be able to listen. There we go. Again, don't feel like you have to go in order. Feel free to skip around. Don't feel like you have to read all of them. You can just choose a couple. I would highly encourage you to take whatever you're using to write and jot down some notes, some questions, things you agree with, don't agree with. And we're going to take about 8 minutes because I really want you to take some time on these readings and to reflect and to really think about them. And at the end of the 8 minutes, we'll come together and I want to hear about if there was a specific reading that really resonated with any of y'all. All right, I just want to check in. We are a little past the halfway point. Kind of give me a thumbs. Let's do, if you want more time, give me a thumbs up. So thumbs up will be like, I want a little bit more time. And if you're ready to go, you can just kind of stay as you are. And a thumbs up is also on the reactions. All right. So it seems that we are ready to, or is there something that, I think I just heard someone on mute. Did someone want to say something? All right, so I think we are ready to move on. And so we read all of these commentaries on the Utane Tokef by rabbis and scholars, and we've read through the words of My Jewish Year. And so I'm just curious, does anyone have a reading that they read, one of the 15 that really stuck out to them in a good way or a bad way?
In our everyday lives, we live with an illusion of control. That essay, that commentary really struck me.
I'm trying to, which number was that one?
4.
Rabbi David Teutsch. In our everyday lives, we live with an illusion of control. So what about that really stood out to you? That concept.
Well, you don't know this, others do. This time last year, I lost my husband to an accident. And so last year, reading the prayer that we just read, I refused to read it because it had been an accident. And Jeff had a chronic health condition, and we had spent years maintaining that, and then he dies from an accident. And so this in our everyday lives, I actually took a picture of it so I could keep it. We live with an illusion of control. It really spoke to me, and that whole essay, that whole commentary there, this false sense of security, that we are in control. And that prayer speaks to that.
Thank you so much for sharing. I also found that to be a really powerful and moving interpretation of the Utane Tokef as well. Is there anyone else that had a reading that stood out to them, either in a good way or a bad way, something they agreed with or didn't agree with from one of the readings?
So I was really taken, well, a couple of them. Number 3, Rabbi Pankin's, our own actions as coping mechanisms. That resonated with me. And then number 7, this notion of divinity as the shadow of human action. I mean, I always think of human beings as B'Tselem Elohim. We're made in the image of God, and yet this is when we act, God acts. And if we don't, can we expect God to act? And I never really thought about it quite like that before. So I'm really thinking about that one a lot. That one's hitting me.
I also found that one very interesting because I feel like it's very easy to say, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. But at the same time, sometimes if it's meant to be, do I have to make it happen in a way? Is that what it's saying? And so I've also found that to be a very interesting reading. Lynn, is there something that you wanted to share?
I was struck by reading number 8, which turns the Untitled Tokef into a very personal prayer, reminding us that tomorrow we might not be here. So let's do Teshuvah today. The late rabbi of blessed memory, Alan Lew, wrote a wonderful book, This is Real and You're Totally Unprepared. In the Untitled Tokef, with the solution there of Teshuvah, Tefillah, and acts of kindness, we can prepare every single day throughout the year. It's a very personal prayer.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. And with that reading, especially, I found it very interesting because we hear this prayer, this is Rabbi Edward Feinstein, who will live, who will die? And what he says is, me, I will live. And someday I will also die. And so it's a very interesting interpretation of it where he just calls forward, it's very easy to kind of say this is a foreign concept, but also the reality is someday I'm both of them. And so I thought that was a very interesting observation that he made as well. Is there anything else that anyone would like to talk about, a reading that really struck them? And so when I was going through these readings, I was thinking about the fact that they really fall into some different categories. There's the kind of idea of we can't change the ultimate outcome, but we can change how we deal with it. Reading 3, talking about from Aaron Pankin that we heard about earlier, talking about the outcome and having an effect on how you work through it and our actions as coping mechanisms. Reading 4, repentance, prayer, and charity might not stop bad things from happening, but it can drastically change how we handle those things. And reading 12 being very similar, and kind of this idea of what they're saying is the outcome probably isn't going to change just because we repent, just because we're charitable, and just because we're praying. But if we do those things, is that going to help us better able to deal with the effects when they happen? What do you guys think about that? Because I know this kind of gets into the realm of predestination, fate versus free will. If it isn't necessarily fate, if things just happen and there's nothing we can necessarily do too much, can we do things to make it better?
Well, I mean, just like we've been talking about, you never know when it's your time. And you do kind of try to be prepared every day to face the fact that, you can say, thank God it's a new day and I have another day. And I say that an awful lot, pretty much every day, and appreciate that I have it and know that one day I'm not going to have it, and it's just this time of year, you say this prayer and you think about that, and you say, let me live each day to the fullest, and let me be really nice to everybody. That'd be a good thing.
It's interesting because when I was younger and I was looking at this prayer, I was like, this is the prayer about death. This is the one that says who's going to die by this way, who's going to die by this way, who by this way, who by this way. And kind of the truth of it is, is it actually, in a way, more about life? And that's what some of these reflections are saying. So when you look at reading 14 and reading 15, it talks about the fact that does the threat of mortality actually lead you to live a better life? And so we have reading 14 saying that the threat of mortality, is that what actually moves us to atone? And how would we live differently if we didn't know if we had another year? Reading 15, there is a specific quote from the book that says, "You could die, so live better." So what do we think about that idea, about the Utane Tokef being more about life?
You know, one thing that impressed me here was number 2, when they talked about the artist, because I'm a poet, and poetry is a form of art. And I noticed the statement that says that all beauty and all art is in some way wrestling with impermanence and death.
Definitely. And I found that really powerful how, so for anyone that didn't read reading 2, it was all about this piano on a barge. And then someone was
Right.
saying, should we use something to stabilize the piano on the barge so it doesn't fall off? And the person is saying, well, the impermanence of whether or not that piano is going to stay up is art in and of itself. And I thought that was a very beautiful metaphor for the fact that, you know, sometimes there is art to the fact that things just happen sometimes and our stability is not always permanent. And then Ben, is there something that you wanted to say?
Well, I just kind of wanted to sort of echo what you're suggesting about this being about life. You know, I think that in reading it and you focusing on the death, I tend to get a lot of dread at first, obviously. But then if you just take a deep breath and you're just like, as you're thinking about it, you're realizing like, wow, it's not a question of like, you know, we can look at it in terms of like, okay, you know, every year we talk about this, but the truth of the matter is nobody here is immortal. You know, we're all going to at some point. And you kind of, there's this kind of just immediate realization with that. I do think that the biggest challenge is that impermanence and really like, when I kind of interpret this, it's usually when one has just in general in life a fixed mindset on most things, a refusal to grow. That's usually when that refusal to grow, that refusal to change, it's not my fault, it's everybody else's fault. At its minor sort of level is not, you know, okay, so that person's probably just not being a nice person, but at its darkest points can be deadly. If you're refusing to change and you're just going to blame everybody else, and then, you know, and I think that's kind of the whole point of it all, is that at the end of the day, in letting go and accepting just the beautiful nature of the impermanence, that's how we can, I don't know, I guess I'm just at this point ranting, but that's just like my immediate thoughts on this.
Ben, I really want to piggyback on you because for many years, besides studying my Judaism, I also studied under a Tibetan Buddhist monk for many years. And one of the things that he taught so beautifully on, and that I guess the Buddha taught so beautifully on, was impermanence. And I learned in those days with that study so much more about the accepting of my own impermanence than I had learned through Judaism. I think there's just a way that they teach on the subject that makes you get it a little easier, you know, this really applies to me. So this Untitled Chapter kind of scratches at it, you know, and says, we're all gonna die. It might not be this year, but one of these years, this will be about you, so get used to it.
Actually, if you think about it, in a way, we've already died many times. We're talking about the final death, but you think back to when you were 3 years old and what you were like, and what you were like at 10, and what you were like at 17, and what you were like at 25. And all those manifestations of yourself are already dead and replaced. So in a way, life is a series of deaths.
How uplifting, Russell. Very uplifting.
I didn't mean not to be uplifting, and I didn't really mean to say there was anything wrong with that, because sometimes in those deaths that you experience during life, there's lots of growth.
And that actually hits on, and I know some of the readings talked about this too. There's many people believe that what the Utane Tokef is an annual reenactment of your death. It's this idea that you're faced every single year with this idea of, especially on Yom Kippur, it's supposed to be you fast, you just take that day to be in temple, think about your sins. And it's that Yom Kippur is almost meant to be a reenactment of your death. And then you come alive again the day after with a new sense of life. And so kind of you're saying how there's many moments in your life where kind of the old you passes on and a new you begins. That's almost what Yom Kippur is expected to do. And I think a lot of the readings here actually talk about that, how it's supposed to be. That's your new beginning, and your new self comes after that. So thank you. And thank you everyone for speaking. These were all really great observations. We only have a few minutes left. And my goal coming into this is that we started the hour listening to the explicit words of the Utane Tokef text, what it is actually saying word for word. And we reflected on, with the explicit text, what that means to us. And then we looked at all of these commentaries, and we had all of these incredible discussions, diving more deeply into what it could mean, what's behind that literal text. And so where we make our own interpretations is when we take the explicit literal text and we take all of the different interpretations and commentaries that we hear, and we fuse it together by taking in the parts that we agree with, the parts that we don't agree with, the things that resonate with us, and we make that meaning for ourselves. And no one else can tell you what your interpretation is. People can tell you their interpretation, but no one else can tell you what your interpretation is. That is for you to figure out, and that is for you to understand. And only you know and believe what your interpretation is. And so is there anybody in the last 4 minutes or so that would like to say something on what they believe that their personal interpretation of the Utane Tokef is? And remember, no one can tell you it's wrong, because you can't have a wrong interpretation. It's your own personal interpretation. So is there anyone that would like to share, given everything we talked about today, what they believe that the Utane Tokef is for them when they hear it in just a week, what meaning it's going to have to them?
Can I say something here?
Of course.
I don't have my own take on it yet. I'm not nearly done with all the texts and with the MP4s that you shared. They made up way more than 8 minutes, so there's no way that I could listen to them, but I've saved them to my desktop. And I do want to thank particularly the last speakers and you, of course, for that new insight that I got. Because this is for me a truly new insight that, you know, what Russell said, you die many times. There's a new you every time, and you reinvent yourself every time. And I never looked at it that way. And thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ellen. And yeah, I mean, that is a very great interpretation of it, definitely. Is there anyone else that would like to share? And again, just like, I mean, Ellen brought up a really important point. This isn't me saying, what is your final interpretation? Because the reality is interpretations evolve over time. And so does anyone want to share, just kind of in their mind, in the here and now, what their kind of formulating as their interpretation of it. We have about 3 minutes left. So is there anyone that would like to share before we wrap up?
Well, Ellen said what I was thinking much better than I could ever say it. So thank you for that, Ellen.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming. And I hope that when you hear the Utane Tokef and this coming Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that it is not something that is just glossed over, that you can really take the time with it and understand it and come to your own unique interpretation of it. I'm the new, I don't know if I said this at the beginning, I'm the new music and cantorial director here at Temple Israel. And so my door is always open. Please come, feel free to say hi. I would love to meet all of you in person at some point and just get to know you better. And I'm excited, so excited to be a part of this community. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight and for sharing your insight and your beliefs and interpretations and for doing this deep dive with all of us. So does anyone have anything, like a last thing to say before we head on?
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yes, I enjoyed the class. Thank you.
Well, it was very, very good.
Yes,
Yashikoach. I thought it was excellent.
Thank you so much. And if anyone would like the readings, I have them. And so if you email me, and I'll put my email address here, I can, oh, hold on. I sent that to Temple Israel as a direct message. EmilyH@timemphis.org. So if you email me there, I'd be happy also to share with you the links to any of the PDFs, any of the audio recordings as well. And again, thank you all so much. I look forward to meeting you all again, and have a great rest of your Wednesday night, everybody.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.